Okay. ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मद् आचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः ॐ सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा कार्पण्यदोषोपहतः स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः यच्छ्रेयस्यानुश्रितं ब्रूहि तन्मय शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम् ॐ वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविर्म एधि वित्तस्य आणिस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासिः अनेन अधीतेन अहोरात्रां सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मावतु तद्वक्तारम् अवतु मामवतु वक्तारम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गे स्तुष्टवाग्वं स्वस्तनूभिः व्यश्येम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजनीव स्वामृतमस्मि द्रविणग्वं सर्वर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षतः इति त्रिशङ्कुर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Now we'll do chapter 3 Shloka recitation from 1 to 16 and then we'll revise 17. Chapter 3. Okay. अथ तृतीयोऽध्यायः अर्जुनोवाच ज्यायसि चेत् कर्मणस्ते मता बुद्धिर्जनार्दन तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां नियोजयसि केशव व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम् Shri Bhagavanuvacha Loke asmin dvividha nishtha pura prokta maya nagha Jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam न कर्मणां नारम्भात् नैष्कर्म्यं पुरुषोष्णुते न च सन्न्यसनादेव सिद्धिं समधिगच्छति न हि कश्चित् क्षणमपि जातु तिष्ठत्य कर्मकृत् कार्यते ह्यवशः कर्म सर्वप्रकृतिजैर्गुणे कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन् इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचारस उच्यते यस्त्वेन्द्रियाणि मनसा नियम्यारभते अर्जुन कर्मेन्द्रिये कर्मयोगम् असक्तः स विशिष्यते नियतं कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्मज्यायो ह्यकर्मणः शरीरयात्रा पिचते न प्रसिद्ध्येद कर्मणः यज्ञार्थात् कर्मणो अन्यत्र लोकोऽयं कर्मबन्धनः तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्तसङ्गसमाचर सह यज्ञापचा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः अनेन प्रसविष्वत्वम् एषोऽस्त्विष्टकामधुक् देवान् भावयतानेन ते देवा भावयन्तु वः परस्परं भावयन्तः श्रेय परमवाप्स्यथ इष्टान् भोगानि वो देवा दास्यन्ते यज्ञभाविताः तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायेभ्यो यो भुङ्क्ते तेन एव सः यज्ञशिष्टशिनः सन्तो मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषे भुञ्जते ते त्वघं पापा ये पचन्त्यात्मकारणात् अन्नात् भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्यादन्नसम्भवः यज्ञात् भवति पर्जन्यो यज्ञकर्म समुद्भवः कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्माक्षरसमुद्भवं तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम् एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्तयति यः अघायुरिन्द्रियारामः मोघं पार्थ स जीवति. The 17th one is यस्त्वात्मरतिरेव स्यात् आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टः तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते. Okay, so please remember to send me Shloka 17 this week. Going back to chapter 4. So one of the most important learnings we had from last class was in Shlok 11.
Tulina, I'm sorry to interrupt for a second. I am not able to connect with my iPad. What is the meeting passcode? Because there has to be a passcode from iPad too. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
I'll WhatsApp it to you.
Yeah, thank you. So sorry to interrupt. Really sorry. Because my phone is dying. So sorry. Really sorry.
Do you need this from me? Copy invitation.
Send it to me. That'll be good.
It has a passcode also, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So Shlok 11, the most important thing that we learned there was that the core of Bhagwanji's blessing and the intensity of his blessing is exactly commensurate with our form of his worship and the intensity of our worship with him. So whatever we give out, we receive back. Another important thing that we learned was that when we are talking of how we worship him, the form in which we worship him and the intensity with which we worship him, it is not just the actual worship sitting in the temple or, it's not direct relationship with God in the sense of how we think about it. It is how we behave with VVGP. Because Bhagwanji is not just in the temple, he is in everything that we see around us. So the way we behave with every Vyakti, Vastu, Paristhiti, and Ghatna, with every single way in which we behave with people around us, that is how we behave with the Lord. And what we give is what we get back many fold. The world is a magnifier. It's like, when we sow a seed of mango, it doesn't just give back one mango. It gives us many mangoes over several seasons. So whatever we do now, it creates a result for us many fold, and not just to be enjoyed in this life, but in next lot of different lives. Okay, so that's something for us to be very aware of. And again, action is not just at the gross level. We have to understand what we are doing at a thought level. So if we get upset with somebody, but we are not saying it, and then we think, oh, I did not say it, so I didn't really do an action, that's not true. If you have thought of it, then it is as good as doing an action. And so we have to come back and always think about action level, at the bhav level. How are we behaving towards people at the bhav level? How are we um, how are we treating the circumstances that get created in our life at a bhav level? Are we getting upset? Are we angry? Are we forgiving? Are we happy? Are we treating everything with gratitude? Right? That is how we are behaving with the Lord. Right? And there is no mercy or cruelty in nature. There's only justice. Mercy is only within the ambit of Bhagwanji. Only he can be merciful. And he is merciful. Everything that happens to us is through his merciful beneficence. Okay? With that, now we come to a very important few shlokas. I think this class is going to be quite thought-provoking and extremely important for us to learn how we are doing our actions. So we'll start with shloka 15. Bhaskar, will you read with me? We will start with connection.
Yeah, connection. The Lord now draws Arjuna's attention to those persons who in the past also attained emancipation in this manner.
Evam nyatva kritam karma.
Evam nyatva kritam karma.
Purvairapi mumukshubhihi.
Purvar api mumukshubhi.
Yeah, mumukshubhihi.
Mumukshubhihi.
Kuru karmaiva tasmatvam.
Kuru karmaiva tasvatmam.
Tasmatvam.
Tasmatvam.
Purvataram kritam.
Purvaya purvatram kritam.
Very nice. Evam is this. Jnatva, by knowing. Kritam, have done. Karma, actions. Purvairapi is purva and api. Purva is ancient, api also. Mumukshubhihi, sincere seekers. Kuru, do. Karma aiva, karma aiva, karmo kohi, only the actions. Tasmat tvam. Tasmat is that's why. Tvam, you too. Purvah, purvajo dwara, by our ancestors. Purvataram kritam, sada se kiye jane wale, those that have always been done.
In ancient times, two aspirants for liberation performed their duties this way, being fully aware of it. Therefore, you should also perform your actions in the way they have been performed by your predecessors in the past. The example of aspirants of the past. Here again, it has been emphasized that from old times, aspirants have been performing their natural duties for the general good. As they were fully aware of the efficacy of such performance for liberation, the reason is that a strong desire for achieving liberation in their lives prompted all their actions. On this basis, the Lord exhorts Arjuna to act likewise.
So in this shloka, he's highlighting that even people in the past, once you achieve enlightenment, you don't stop action. Action continues. But to continue being enlightened, you perform your actions based on these principles. Now, what are these principles? One, do an action without first giving up the conceit of doership. Right? Don't say, I am doing the action. Remove that ego, that conceit of doership, right? The second is don't get attached to the results, because you don't owe the results are not owed to you, right? And the third is every action that you do for lok sangraha, you do it for the greater good. And that way, any action, and this will be explained further with a lot more detail, but that way, when you perform an action with this bhav, the consequences of that action don't stick on you. Otherwise, you're always stuck in the cycle of karma, where you'll always have to pay back for the consequences of your action. If you're attached to results, or if you feel like you are doing it, the I-ness and the minus kicks in, then that will always create bondage. So he's saying this is something that has been used for every person that has achieved self-realization. And even after achieving it, they continue operating with these principles, because action cannot be avoided.
Again, he is constantly giving us examples of other people, telling us that when you're reading it and you're trying to understand this, if you start to think, oh, this seems very difficult, he's constantly telling us that it is not that difficult. People have consistently used these practices to achieve liberation. So if others have been able to do it, so can you. And that must come as a inspiration to all of us. Okay, every time we feel difficulty, we should know that others have done it, so can I. We'll go ahead. Ramya, will you read with us?
Connection, as a matter of principle, what the Lord has said about dispassionate and selfless actions is generally accepted. But when actions are initiated, the dispassionate attitude usually evanesces, and the desire for worldly gains in the form of the outcome acquires preponderance as the main propelling force for motivating actions. If the outcome is not happy, frustration results. Why should it be so? For this, the Lord says,
Kim karma kim karmeti.
Ki karma kim akarmeti.
Yeah. Kim karma kim karmeti.
Okay. Kim karma kim karmeti.
Yeah. Not kim karmeti, it's because it is a karma, right? You recognize it correctly, but ma and a are put together, and so it is kima karmeti. Kim karma kim karmeti.
Kim karma kim karmeti.
Kavayopyatra mohitaha.
Kavayopyatra mohitaha.
Tatte karma pravakshyami.
Tatte karma pravakshyami.
Yajnatva mokshase shubhat.
Yajnatva mokshe shubha.
Yeah, mokshase shubhat.
Mokshase shubha.
Very nice. Kim is what is. Kya hai?
Sorry.
What is karma, action? And kim, Akarmeti. What is inaction? Kavayo, Kavayaha is intelligent people. Api atra, also atra to determine. Nirnay karne mein, to determine. Mohitaha, get confused. Tat te, that to you. Karma, essence of action, karma tattva. Pravakshyami, I will tell you clearly. Yaj kyatva, knowing which. Moksha, mukta ho jayega, will be liberated. Ashubha, from all that is inauspicious.
When the wise ones are confused as to what constitutes action and what constitutes inaction. Hence, I shall explain to you the implications of action, on knowing which you shall escape evil, cycle of births and deaths. Implication of act.
So before we read this, before we read this, the next 3 or 4 shlokas will only talk about action and inaction. Now, from a semantic perspective, it seems fairly easy to understand. But there are 2 levels at which you need to understand action and inaction. So action, in the term that we all understand, is movement, is doing an act, right? It's if I'm going for a run, that act is I am running. If I'm doing my work, the act is I'm sending out emails and I'm doing my work and I'm thinking, right? That's the gross level of action. The gross level of inaction, the way we understand, is somebody seemingly not doing anything, right? Someone who's just sitting there. But we all know that there is no such thing as inaction in a gross perspective. By not acting is also an action. By not doing my duty of taking my son to school in the morning, I've chosen to act by not acting at a gross level. Is that understood? Yeah? So from a gross perspective, that's how we look at action and inaction. In this shloka, Bhagwanji says that a person may be sitting and not doing any act, seemingly, but as long as they're thinking the act, they are still in action. Thinking is also constituted as action. And if you actually do a little bit of reflection on this, you'll realize thinking is the start of every action.
At gross level.
At a gross level, right? So in the world that we live in, legally, you cannot go to jail if you think about killing someone. That's not enough, right? But at the spiritual level, you have added consequence and karmic bondage by having that thought. Which is why we have to work. The world will judge us at action level, gross action level, but in the spiritual journey, you have to work at the thought level, at the bhav level, because nothing in the gross world that you create or you do or you engage or act in is done without the thought level. And all of us know that there is no such thing as inaction at the thought level. Even when we are sleeping, there is activity that is going on, right? So that's understanding action, inaction at a gross level. In the next couple of shlokas, we will talk about action and inaction from a bondage level, which is which acts create bondage for us to come back to life and birth, and which acts do not create that bondage, which is then constituted as inaction. All right. So right now, for this shloka, we will read it and understand more about the thought level of action.
Implications of actions need for explanation. Action is commonly construed as an effort made to secure a certain end, whereas inaction is understood to signify an absence of effort. But an effort need not necessarily be a movement of the limbs. The processes of thinking and contemplating are also actions. Though such actions do not involve any movement of limbs, and a person engaged in an intense, thoughtful, or contemplative activity may appear to be sitting absolutely still and inactive. Thus, the most strenuous mental action may appear to be inaction and vice versa.
So this is the example that I just shared as well, right? A person seemingly doing nothing in the gross world will be like, he's in inaction. But we know at the thought level, there could be a lot of action, right?
An activity of the limbs not calculated to bring about any result is not considered to be an action at all. Therefore, the term action and inaction have a significance deeper than their surface meanings. This is why the Lord emphasizes that while trying to understand the correct import of the words action and inaction, the thoughts and the motives underlying them cannot be ignored. He simulates situations in which a state of apparent inactivity may compel one to suffer or enable one to enjoy results as if some intense action had been performed. And contrarily, a state of hectic activity may be unproductive of a result, making it appear as if no action had been performed.
So to give an example, you want to say something?
So here, I think the most important thing to remember to clarify the words is action or karma is that which creates, it's got nothing to do with gross level motor activity or anything. What it really means is whether it will create a bondage for you or not, plain and simple. Okay. An action is that which creates bondage, and inaction is that which will not create a bondage. Okay. And both action and inaction, we will come to the, I'll talk more about it in the next shloka, where we also introduce a third term called vikar. Okay. So, but action and inaction are always based on dharma. Okay. Now, the difference that he's trying to bring about in this shloka is that activity at gross level does not have any relationship to the word action per se. So the meanings have to be like, we have to alter the meanings in our heads now. So whenever we say karma, whenever we say action, it means something that we are doing with a certain motivation, certain desire, and hence it will create a bondage. Inaction is that which is done without that motivation for desire, that which is done with yagya bhav, that which is done for God realization, that which is done as a duty, and hence it is an inaction. Okay. That this is the difference between action and inaction. Now, getting to an example level, it is my duty to do some work, okay, to perform some kind of work. If I do it, I actually do all the strenuous activity that is required to complete my duty with no desire for the result thereof. That action is actually inaction. That activity is actually inaction. But if I'm supposed to do some work and I just sit here doing nothing, even though apparently there is no activity happening, even my mind may be completely dull, there is no thought also, okay? All I'm doing is just sitting around. Then also it will constitute to be something that is creating a bondage for me because I haven't done what needs to be done. Right? So the example that Abhinav gave, where he's supposed to drop his child to school and he chooses our child to school, and he chooses not to do it. He's just sitting and doing nothing. That is going to create bondage. Okay, and that bondage will So even though there is no activity, so the words action and inaction are not to be interpreted any longer going forward henceforth as activity at gross level. We will now interpret action and inaction as those that create bondage and those that don't create bondage. Activities that create bondage, whether it is at bhav level, it is at thought level, whether it is at action level. Okay. And those that don't. So there could be a lot of mental activity, physical activity, bhav level activity, which can or cannot create bondage for us. Okay.
I mean, and to understand it really simply, I'm failing to think of a decent analogy, but jab tak, till you are in the world and you're interacting with worldly objects, you're just shooting out more and more webs in the world, right? But we have a body and we do live in the world and we do have to act. So Bhagwanji is saying there is a way, and this is the way for us to do our action so that those webs don't keep getting more and more entangled in the world. You do what you have to do as per your duty, as per your purpose, and no more. And then all these webs that we have in the world will, he's already given us a guarantee in chapter 2 that they will definitely, it will be like putting match to a haystack. As long as you perform your actions with purpose and with duty and not for result. Moment you crave for result, moment you think I want this because my house will be this, you're just shooting more webs of attachment.
So there's nothing new per se. We know, we've read about this in great detail in chapter 3. What is new is how we will start to, this is a shade deeper to our understanding of karma that we've already gained from chapter 3, the yagya bhav that we've already learned in chapter 3. This will go one step deeper, which will help you discern action in inaction and inaction in action. Okay.
So what is also highlighting is you may physically not engage in a wrong act, or if I'm fasting for the entire day, I may choose to give up food because I want to give my body a break, I want to control my tongue, I want to control my senses. But my entire day I'm in a bad mood. I'm constantly thinking of food. Cannot do my duty because I'm hungry. That action has actually not been good for you because your mental state has been so bad, which nobody else can see except for you. That has created more bondage. Even though end of the day, you might feel really happy that, oh, I did not eat and I successfully did my tap of not eating the entire day. But from a spiritual perspective, you've created more bondage. Because at the mental level, you've not found that peace.
And because if you've already thought of food, then you've already eaten, right? We've seen that. If you can, in chapter 2, they had specified that if you forcibly keep your senses away from the sense objects, but at mental level you're engaging with them, then that person is actually called what? What's the word?
Oh.
Hypocrite. It's a hypocrite, right? So, okay, let's go ahead. Ashwin.
Yeah. Connection. Now the Lord says, while initiating actions, their correct significance should be clearly understood. If this is not done, it may result in great mischief.
Karmano hyapi bodhavyam.
Karmano hyapi bodhavyam.
Bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha.
Bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha.
Akarmanascha bodhavyam.
Akarmanasha bodhavyam.
Gahana karmano gatihi.
Gahana karmano gatihi.
Karmano, karma ka swarup, the essence of karma. Here P, kyonki, he is kyonki, because api is bhi. Also, bodhavyam, Janna chahiye, must understand. Bodhavyam is again the same word. Cha is and, vikarmanaha, wrong action. So understand the essence of karma as well as the vikar, the wrong action. Akarmanascha, and bodhavyam, understand the essence of akarm also, inaction. Gahna, gehen hai, is deep. Karmano, karm ki, that of karm. Gati, gati is typically, it means where you go or where they go. Here it means what they mean. So it's basically saying what is the meaning of karma is very, very deep. Let's read.
It is necessary to clearly understand action in all aspects, all its aspects. Also, the implications of inaction and forbidden action should also be understood, for all these terms have very deep significance.
So before we read the rest of the paragraph, which will help us understand action, inaction, and wrong action or forbidden action, only two things to remember is that action that is based on dharma, okay, it has to be based on dharma, that which is done, or based on duty, that which is based on what is scripturally sanctified. They can be either karma or akarma. Both of them are based on dharma. But that which is based on adharma is vikar, forbidden actions. Okay, so those which we are not supposed to do, wrong actions, are what are called vikar. They will always create a bondage, and they will create a negative bondage. But we can also do actions that are based on that are scripturally correct. So things that we do as good people, right? We do good things. But if they are motivated by a certain desire to enjoy their result, they become karma. And if they are done with the yajna bhav, only as a duty, only based on what I need to do for my ultimate welfare and not to enjoy their result, they become akarma. Right?
And just the other thing to add here, right? There is no absoluteness in all of this. Depending on your own purpose, your own duty, something could be a forbidden action for me, but it might not be for my brother-in-law who works in the army, right? So it would be his duty to protect the country, but it's certainly not mine. So he would do certain acts which would be forbidden act for me. He would have certain thoughts and plans, which is part of his duty, but that's not for me to engage in, right? So don't try and put everything in life in certain buckets. This is for you to identify based on your duty and your dharma.
Yeah. So what is the duty, as we said, is based on dharma, is based on desh, kal, paristhiti, and ashram. So it is actions by themselves at a gross level. We cannot say whether it is dharma, vidharma, whether it is a karma, or vikar, right? Because at gross level, we have no idea what else has gone behind it and what is the circumstances of the person who actually took those steps. So we are not to label anything outwardly as in a certain way. It's always driven by desh, kal, ashram, and paristhiti. Let's
The need to understand action, inaction, and forbidden action. In this shloka, it has been emphasized that it is necessary for a human being to clearly understand the implications of the terms action, inaction, and forbidden action. By the word karma or action is meant a compulsive effort one is bound to perform due to one's particular situation at that time. What thoughts should attend such an effort is a matter to be decided specifically. By the word vikarma or forbidden action is meant a contrary or prohibited action. It is necessary to understand clearly that a certain action may be a bound-in duty in one set of circumstances, but in another, it may be forbidden. By the word akarma or inaction, it is commonly understood that not doing any action or effort is inaction. But a close scrutiny would reveal that this presumption is mistaken. Sometimes omission to do an action itself becomes an action, giving due favorable or unfavorable results. On the other hand, if an action is performed with an objective mind, it gives a result which does not affect the doer. In such a case, despite a positive effort having been made, the result that the doer is not affected, as if no action was performed. To understand all these implications, some deep and serious thought is necessary. This is why all these terms are said to have great significance. It would be highly imprudent to run away with the thought that since these terms have a deep significance, they are imponderable, and one may do as one may deem fit when the occasion arises. This is why the Lord cautions that the implications of these terms must be clearly understood beforehand.
Yeah. So why are we reading about all this is because it's really important to understand that all actions that we engage in should be with the purpose of self-realization, right? And that starts, like we mentioned in the previous shloka, at the thought level. Now I'll give you an example, although it's not a perfect example, but I'll give you an example. Suppose you want to run a marathon. So you've put that as a goal. You have, for that, you have used your intellect and your antakaran to identify a schedule, put a training plan in place, and the consistency of going every day to go for a run, right? So that's what this line highlights, is the thought, what thoughts should attend to such an effort is a matter to be decided specifically for it to be a karma. So you've put your plan in place and you start going for a run every single day. Now I go for a run first 2-3 days, and Tuina doesn't appreciate me for the effort that I'm doing, and I start getting resentful. Look, I'm putting so much effort, I'm running 10K, but like I'm not getting acknowledged. Other people are acknowledging me, not Tuina. What have I done? I have become so attached to the action, or rather in this case, my need for praise, that I've created further bondage from a very simple goal, which is to go for a run.
Yeah, then they thought boils down to the purpose with which you wanted to go for a run in the first place.
Yeah. So if I said the purpose was to complete a marathon, to push my limits.
But why do a marathon in the first place? Are you doing it for getting other people's praise? Is that for,
Yes.
right? So it all comes down to your bhav and
Yes.
your purpose, why you're doing an action.
Correct.
Which will determine something.
Correct.
If the purpose is to make your body fit so that it is the right medium through which the actions of Lord can be performed, then it's the right purpose. But if it is for
Getting praise,
getting praise for the effort, or if it is to, like, make yourself look good, then it's a wrong purpose, right? Then it's a
Correct.
worldly purpose.
Correct.
It boils down to that.
Correct. So for this example, the karma, the first part, if I'm doing it for any reason which is getting me more attached to praise, etc., that is me doing more action. I'm creating more bondage, despite doing something good for my body and for my mind and everything else.
Yeah.
Right? Because the softer purpose is I want praise. The softer purpose is I want people to compliment that I've become thinner and I've lost 5 kgs. If I walk into a room and nobody compliments the fact that I've lost 5 kgs, then I feel like, what the hell? All those softer things, and these happen in seconds in your mind. They're not even conscious thoughts. When you're doing the act, it all creates bondage. The same thing, for it to be in action, is at the bhav level. You would just go for a run because it's the right thing to do for your own mental state and physical state, because it allows you to come back and perform your duty better. And suppose 4 days or 5 days in a row, I couldn't go for a run, then I don't get upset. I don't get attached to that activity. Right? That also happens. That, yeah, I don't care about people not praising me. But for 2 weeks in a row, my son is sick, something else happened, I had late nights, this, that. All of this is part of my duty. And I couldn't go for a run for 2 or 3 weeks. And now I'm irritated. And I'm blaming people. Right? So
again, it will boil down to the purpose. If the purpose is to keep your body and your mind fit and healthy, then even if you do not find time because of your circumstances to go for a run, either you will find another activity to replace this activity which serves the same purpose, but within the constraints that you have, right? You can be locked up in a room, you will find a way to like exercise in that place, right? Within like 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever you have. You will find, as long as your purpose is clear, you will find the way to get to that purpose without being attached to a particular means of getting to that purpose. The moment we get attached to the means rather than the purpose, here in this case, activity of running, then you've lost sight of that purpose. You've lost your connection to that purpose, even if you started out. And that is what happens more often than not. We all will start out with the right purpose, and then very quickly at some stage, lose our connection to that purpose and then go down to the act level, which is what happened to Bhishma Pitama. When he started out by taking his big pledge of celibacy, it was rooted in a certain principle. But over a period of time, he lost sight of that original purpose, and the gross level at which represented at that time quite accurately his purpose also. And then that gross thing, it lost the connection to the purpose, and this guy was not connected to the purpose but to that gross level. So as it drifted away further and further from the purpose, he also got drifted away, and he did not realize that, oh, I need to leave this gross thing because it no longer represents my purpose. Go back and find another thing that represents, right? So that Bhishma Pitama consciousness happens to us a lot. We start out with that purpose, we find something in the gross level which gets us to that purpose, and at some point of time, we just get attached to that activity. Even something sattvic like going to temple or doing puja, if it starts to irritate us because somebody became a hindrance or something caused a hindrance to that activity, we know that we've lost connection to the purpose in the first place. So that Bhishma Pitama consciousness is very, very strong and comes very, like, without us even knowing. We have to be very conscious at all times of what thoughts are coming into our mind.
do you want to give the brush?
How, sorry, like how Bhishma Pitama lost his purpose in terms of what you mentioned, like in what context?
So in that particular case, it's not directly relevant, but to help you understand why I'm saying that is, Bhishma Pitama took a vow of celibacy because he wanted his father to be happy. Okay, he gave up his personal this thing to make him happy, and then and to give assurance. So first of all, that celibacy was, anyway, it was not like perfectly rooted in principle, because before this pledge was taken, Hastinapur's throne was given on the basis of merit, okay, not on the basis of who you are born to. It was not given to a person by birth. This was the moment when it started, when the throne would be given by birth. Otherwise, it was always a case that you have to be meritorious to ascend to the throne. When he said that, no, I will not ascend the throne, even though he was meritorious in every way, I will give it to the person who is born of the lady his father wanted to get married to. Matsyagandha, no, not Matsyagandha. I forget the name, but the person who his dad wanted to get married to, that woman's child will be the king and not me, is when he broke away from the right tradition in the first place. But he thought he was giving up something. At a physical level, it feels like a very big tyag. It feels like almost like a sattvic tyag. He's giving up his own ambitions, his own things for somebody else. But even though it seems like a tyag, and yes, there is tyag involved, but the purpose of the tyag was to make his dad happy. But his dad, what do you mean by making his dad happy? If his dad is becoming happy because of some physical, material world thing, then you attached yourself to a wrong purpose altogether, right? And then eventually, when the he that transformed, that transmuted to, I have a vow to protect whoever sits on this throne. This throne is supposed to represent a person who will take care of their subjects. And he walked away from that principle to, I will take care of, and I have my vow towards whoever is the person sitting on that throne. And that if that person has walked away from being a benefactor of the kingdom, the upholder of the principles, he forgot that, then he did not get himself away from that, right? He knew that the person sitting on the throne is actually with adharma, and the person who is not on the throne is with dharma. He recognized that, and yet he did not recognize that his vow to protect the person sitting on the throne was not to protect the person on the throne as much as it was to protect the dharma that goes with that represents the king's seat. Because king is supposed to be the protector and upholder of all values. If he's not doing that, then he's not king anymore, and he's not fit to be king any longer. So there is that disconnect between the principles and the gross, which represents principles. And more often than not, this gross then starts to go away from the principles. So you have to, if you're connected to the principles, it doesn't matter what the gross is. The gross will go away. You'll find something else. You'll find something else that represents this. So, and Bhishma Pitama mentality is when you lose sight of the purpose and you catch onto the gross, and as it drifts further and further away, you are not able to recognize that, and you think it is your duty, your enjoined duty to go with this gross.
So I'll share a story, right, that will make this quite practical and easy to visualize. And I may have shared this story a few months ago. This is a story of two monks. And these two monks had taken a lifetime vow as part of their study and sadhana.
That's a very good example.
That they would never touch a woman. Right? I think Kavita is nodding her head because she'll remember this story from, I think Kumar would have also shared it a couple of times. So one day they both were walking somewhere, and they reached a overflown river, like a river that was gushing. And there was a very, very attractive woman there who was stuck on the banks of the river and the water. So one of the monks was an elderly gentleman, one was a young monk. So immediately the young monk was like, oh, but we've made a vow never to touch a woman. The elderly monk, without a thought, jumped into the river, picked up the beautiful woman in his arms, and they crossed the river together. And on the other side, he let the woman go. She profusely thanked them, and she went away. And the two monks continued on their journey. Now, the younger monk was very agitated. He's like, dude, I looked up to this fellow, and now he's like broken his vow so easily without giving it a thought. He didn't, like, he just jumped in. And first hour, second hour, third hour, he was just getting very agitated that he's not even sharing anything with me. He's not talking to me about it. He's just broken our lifetime vow of being a monk, etc. And so after a few hours, he finally said, okay, I need to talk to you. And he said, the young monk asked, how could you do it? How could you pick up a woman in your arms when we explicitly are told not to touch a woman? And the elderly monk basically looked at the young monk and said, yes, I picked up the woman, but I left her at the bank 4 hours ago. You're still carrying her with you in your mind. Right? So the inaction, the seemingly inaction of the monk, the younger monk has created more bondage.
So that inaction is actually an action. Whereas the older monk who took an action, his action is actually inaction, because at the mind level, at the bhav level, the thought that went with his action, which was to save the person, had got nothing to do with him breaking or keeping the vow. So he has still kept his vow without while doing his duty that needed to be done. Even though at an action level, at a gross action level, it may seem like, oh, he's broken the vow, but actually, when you look at it from a scriptural perspective, he's not broken the vow. He's kept the vow and done his duty.
And what Tuina mentioned also is that chances are for the elderly gentleman, he did not even register or care to register if it was a boy or a girl. He only wanted to do his duty as a human being. If I can save the person's life, I will save. But the younger monk registered that it's a girl and built a completely different hypothesis based on his own understanding. So this is a very simple example of action and inaction. And
whether you are holding on to gross level or at the purpose level.
At the bhav level. Kavita, you wanted to say something? I thought you went on mute for a second. No.
Venkat, will you read with us? Smita, will you read with us?
Sure. Connection. In the context of this discussion, the Lord lays down an important postulate.
Karmanya karmaya pashyed.
Karmana ya karma ya pashye.
Karmani cha karmayah.
The karmani cha ya karmayah.
Not the karmani. So pashyed plus karmani was it put together in the sandhi becomes pashyed karmani. So we are doing a sandhi vichhed here. So karmanya karmayah pashyed. Then
Karmani. Yeah, okay. Karmani cha karmayah.
Sabuddhiman manushyeshu.
Sabuddhimana manyuyeshu.
Manushyeshu.
Manusyeshu.
Sayuktah kratsna karmakrat.
Sayuktah kratsa karmana krat.
Kratsna karmakrat.
Kratsna karmakrat. Okay.
Karmanye, karma me, in the action. Karma, in action. Yaha, who. Pashyet, can see or can perceive. Karmani, karma me, in inaction. Cha, and karma, action. Yaha, who. Sa, that. Buddhiman manushyeshu, that intelligent human being. Sa yuktaha, he is connected, he is a yogi. Kritsna karmakrit, samast karmo karne wala hai, true performer of actions.
One who recognizes action in inaction and inaction in action is wise amongst human beings. And such a one is a true yogi and a true performer of actions.
So in this story that I just shared, what would be action in inaction is the younger monk, right? He is creating bondage. He's creating action by seemingly not doing anything. And what is inaction? Inaction is the older monk, where he is doing an act, but in reality, he is not creating bondage because he's doing it with the right purpose.
Another example would be, when we are walking down the road and we see a peel of, say, banana on the ground, okay? If we choose to do nothing about it, it came in our consciousness, we choose to do nothing about it and we just walk away, that inaction is actually going to create an action. It is actually an action because you have specifically chosen not to do something about it, right? You walk away, that's action in inaction. But someone who saw that for being there and picked it up and threw it in the dustbin, you've taken an action, but you have actually, because this is your duty and you've done it. By the way, again, now here, this is an action, okay? But if you did it with the purpose that I'm going to throw it in the dustbin, people will look at me and say, oh, wow, you're doing such a good civil duty. And if nobody does that, then I get upset. Then that also is action in action. Action in action, okay? But if we did it with just a, without a thought to, I am the doer, I'm not getting any ego inflated by it. See, I'm such a good person, I'm not doing that. I just do it because it has to be done and, just do it and move along, right? It creates no further thought in my head. That is action in, that is inaction in action. Like there is no action being performed, there's no bondage being created. So there can be an inaction being when you are actually in real action, in a physical form. Or you can have an action which creates bondage while you're actually doing that action. Or it could be an action in inaction, depending on how you do it, what you do, and what is the bhav with which you're doing it. And this is what we need to start being able to discern in everything that we do and think about. Forward.
Action in inaction and inaction in action. In the matter of performance of actions, this shlok is very important. What is meant by recognizing action in inaction? It is that omission to do certain action enjoined as duty would not lead to an escape from the results of that omission simply on the pretext that nothing was done by one. Thus, the result of not doing anything would be the same as if a contrary act was done. This would clarify what it is to see action in inaction.
Another example here would be if something wrong is happening, right? And we are all onlookers to an injustice being done. If we sit quiet when that injustice is being done, you may have heard it several times that if you're sitting quiet when an injustice is happening, you're as bad as perpetrator of that injustice. This is an action in inaction. Even though you stand quietly as an onlooker and don't say anything, don't do anything, perceive, like you may think that I have not done any action here, so I've been in inaction, but you've actually done an action by being in inaction in that moment. And so you will suffer the same consequences, you will be bonded in the same manner as the perpetrator of that injustice.
And in that example, if you acted, but you were still not able to save whatever crime that was taking place, right? In that scenario, you would still have been considered as a person who's been in inaction in action. That means you've not treated bondage. So the result did not matter.
Yeah.
If you were not able to save the crime, that doesn't matter, because we're not your bondage is not measured on the circumstance of the worldly pluses and minuses. Your bondage is based on your internal state. You acted out of your duty, you tried your best, that's it. You're not bound by that result. That makes sense? And all of this is very subtle and the words get confusing. But if you read it a few times and you think about it, they'll start becoming clearer and clearer.
Let's go ahead.
Let's go.
On the other hand, recognizing inaction in action is also necessary. Normally, when an action is done, one stands to suffer or enjoy its results also. But if a duty is performed, as may be ordained by scriptural precepts, without any egoistic conceit and without any desire or expectation of happiness from its results, one remains unaffected by its outcome. Not only that, it liberates one from the bondage of motivated actions done earlier too. Thus, even though all requisite effort is made in the performance of beautiful action, One remains unaffected by the results, as if nothing had been done. In other words, one recognizes inaction in all such actions.
And this is for, like with everything else in the Gita, this is for you to recognize in yourself. We can never judge for anyone else, right? Whether they're built bondage, not built bondage, because we have no visibility to their internal state. But this is key for you to understand for your own self. Is in this act, am I doing it with the right purpose? Or do I have a slight expectation of praise? Do I have a slight expectation of, if I get that promotion, it will actually make me happy? That will create bondage.
In fact, I'll take it one step higher. Okay. If you see somebody's action and you create a judgment in your own thoughts about who they are being or what they are doing, typically if you give it a serious thought, you would realize that that judgment reflects your inner state more than anything else, because the only place that has come from is your inner self. So if you're creating a negative judgment on somebody, then the first place to look and correct is yourself. That means you have that traces of that tendency that you're ascribing to somebody else. That tendency exists in you. If you did not have that tendency inside of you, you would not judge another person with that tendency at all. So the moment you see something in someone else, you think, oh, this person is so angry, or like this person is doing this because of praise, or that person is so judgmental, then know that the first most sinner for that judgment is my own self. I am the one who's more judgmental. I am the one who's coming from that space. So I am a bigger sinner than anybody else around me. So first, let's correct it in myself. Everything that is outside of us is a reflection of what is inside of us at all points of time.
One who does all actions, keeping both these points in view and refrains from doing forbidden actions, is undoubtedly wise amongst human beings. Such a person is not bound by the actions done, and non-performance of any action merits the status of renunciation, which leads to liberation even in this life. Such a man is, therefore, fit to be called a yogi. He is also a fit performer of actions, as he knows the secret of performance of actions. In order to have a fuller understanding, it must first be clear that an action does not comprise merely an effort or an exertion. In fact, an action has three main constituents. The first is the motive of the action. The second is the effort and the exertion needed for the action. The third constituent is its outcome. Let us examine all the three constituents in detail. The motive of an action may be to fulfill a prescribed duty or a worldly desire. Sometimes the needs of the body, like hunger, thirst, may also take place of motive of an action which one would not otherwise like to perform. If out of these three motives, the one for worldly desires is eliminated, then all actions activated by remaining motives can be called inactions.
This is important. This is very important, right? We've always said that purpose is the most important thing from where we start a particular action. So we understand the first part really well, that if you're doing something to do it as a duty versus a worldly desire, then we know if we are pursuing a worldly desire, then the motive is wrong. But if you are pursuing self-realization, then that is a good motive to have. However, sometimes the motives can be stuff that you need to do, right? Need to do on an absolute need to do basis. Like I need to eat food once or twice a day to keep this body healthy. So if you're doing an action based on that, you're eating food based on that, then it will not ever create a bondage in me. So just because I gave an example of food, they always say that if we eat food 2 times a day, you are a yogi. If you're eating food 3 times a day, you are a bhogi. And if you eat it 4 times a day, you are rogi. And if 5 times a day, then there is another word which basically translates to meaning that you're snatching things away from other people. You're like a thief. I don't remember the exact word. So if we are doing things because of the specific needs, then the actions that are done for that will never create any bondage. Another example would be, if you think about your daily ablutions, brushing your teeth, taking a bath, any of those activities, you realize you don't even think about it. You're not thinking of yourself, wow, what an amazing teeth brusher I am. See how beautifully I brush my teeth. Nobody thinks like that. You're doing it out of, that needs to be done. It needs to be done. You just go, you do it, and you get along with, get on with life. Any action that is done that way, because it has to be done and that's it, you don't think about it, it doesn't create any further thought. You don't go around thinking, oh, somebody did not, oh, Abhinav did not praise me because I brushed my teeth today morning. If I don't have that kind of thoughts, right, it just sounds so silly to even think about it, right? That is an inaction. You've created no bondage by doing that action. And that is the state that Sankhya yogis typically are in.
Yeah. And in this example, you may have bought a new toothpaste, you may have bought a new toothbrush, all relevant to what your dental hygiene is focused on. But then you don't go and say like, like waiting for the other person to like compliment your breath because you've got this new mint gel toothpaste. It sounds so silly, right? But that's what we do.
Have you done that ever in your life? Managed to create an action even in something that's supposed to be in inaction. So we do have examples where even when you're not supposed to create a bondage, we end up creating a bondage. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so these are examples, like that is the state that we can be in for everything that we do in our lives. And that a person who does all actions in that manner is a true performer of actions, is a true yogi, because he is doing everything that is needed by him. He may be a grahast with children, he will do everything that needs to be done to provide for his family, to do what is his duty towards his parents, his children, his community. He'll be very, very active in the entire in his entire day, and yet he is doing no actions if he is doing it the way we do our brush every day. Let's go ahead.
Effort or exertion can never be eliminated in life. Its elimination will give rise to idleness or inactivity, which will itself give rise to some unwanted contrary result. Therefore, it will be a grave mistake to regard the omission of effort or exertion as inaction. This is not inaction at all, but is in itself an action. The forbidden actions or contrary actions often result from this mistaken view.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just highlighting what we've already discussed a few times now, that action starts and almost ends at the bhav level, at the thought level. That's where the entire game is. And we've always talked about antakaran ki shuddhi, which is mind, mind, intellect, and ego. The antakaran is because that will allow us to purify our own thoughts. That will allow us to not have thoughts which motivate worldly desires, which then create bondage.
The outcome of an effort or that of an activity is called its fruit. In case of dedication of the outcome of fruit to the Lord, the action assumes the shape of inaction. After dedicating the outcome, the result is acknowledged with humility. It is then accepted as benediction of the Lord and is not enjoyed or suffered as something earned. Acceptance of benediction makes the actions like roasted seeds, which do not sprout. Sorry, what is acceptance of benediction makes the actions like roasted seeds?
Yeah, so this is prasad buddhi, right? And the concept of yagya shisht. So when you have done an action and the results get accrued to it, if you've done it with the proper yagya bhav, the results have been dedicated to Lord, then it isn't as if like, you will not enjoy the results. The prasad that has come, you will still have the prasad, but you will not be the sufferer or enjoyer of the result. I'll give you a more practical example so that you can understand this. If I'm the owner of wealth that I want to invest, okay, I have a wealth manager who's helping me put that wealth to use, okay, to like invest it. If I'm the one taking all the calls and this guy is only an executor of my choices, I tell him, put this money, A funds to be put in here, B funds here, C funds here. If all this guy does is like, yes, sir, give it to me, I'll do it exactly as you say. And if he does it exactly the way I tell him to, the results of that investment, whatever they are, whether they are positive or negative, who's going to be the enjoyer or sufferer of those results? Me, not the person who did exactly as I told him to do, right? So he is just executing my will. So then there is nothing I can say to him. He's done exactly what he's been told. Then the results come to me. If, however, I told him to put in A, B, C, plan A, plan B, plan C, he goes out and he says, you know what, I don't think plan A is that great. I think plan D is much better. And he starts to put in his will in the way. And he then puts plan B, plan E, plan F in his place from his best intellect. Okay. He also wants my best. But his point of view told him that, ABC doesn't sound that right to me. You know what, like my mind tells me DEF will get better results. If that DEF actually happens, and then whatever be the results that come from it, who will be the enjoyer or sufferer of those results? Not me, this guy. If things are good, then he's the one who did it. He's the one who will say, yes, I did it, I made the right choices. And he will then get results from that. If they are really bad, then he's the one who will get the results again. That he because he chose to use his brain and not do as per my will. He did what his will said is the right thing to do. Okay. So this is if this person, when he's doing my will, when I have told him, use my funds and put them in plan ABC, and he does it exactly like this, then whatever be the result, that action is like a roasted seed. And why is it a roasted seed? Because actions, when they are done in a usual manner, they are seeds that will sprout further fruit for us. If they are roasted with yagya bhav, then you put them in the ground, you give them all the manure, water, sunlight that it requires, it will not sprout into any result. Right? So that is why yagya bhav se kiye hue actions are considered to be roasted seeds. Seeds they are. Seeds they always are. Whether they are capable of sprouting or not depends on how we do it.
Yeah, I'm on the seed analogy. The way to visualize it is each action sprouts seeds, and the seeds fall on the ground, and the roots go deeper and deeper for the seeds. And each root is an analogy for bondage, right? You get more stuck in sansar. So our job is we will have consequences of actions. If we're able to do it as roasted seeds with the right bhav, then we're reducing or we're negating the consequence of that action.
And then eating it as a yagya shisht or with prasad buddhi means that when the prasad comes to you, you eat like prasad is to be eaten like prasad, right? You don't do ever, when you have a prasad buddhi, if the food is served to you as prasad, you eat it as prasad. You don't sit there saying, oh, imagine when we were even children, if the prasad was given and you start saying stuff like, Mama, I don't like this, Mama, I don't like that, what will you be told? That this is prasad. Don't try and find this thing. It's not normal food. It is prasad. Whatever is given as prasad, it is good. Eat it. Right? We've always been told that. So you've never heard people saying masala kam hai, salt kam hai, meetha kam hai, or prasad. Prasad is prasad and you eat it because it is good for you, right? That's how it is always consumed. And if you've been given a lot of halwa, you won't just eat it by yourself. Prasad is always to be shared with others, right? So those are very critical ways in which we look at prasad. One, you do not find fault with prasad and you consume it with gratification because it is for your own good.
Gratitude.
And with gratitude, not gratification, yes. You eat it with gratitude and you share it with others. So when the results of your actions accrue to you as prasad, you have the same mentality towards that. If you get promotion, if you get money, if you get certain physical resources that make your life easier, you use those resources to make life of your loved ones, your family, your friends, your community, in whatever way it becomes apparent, you share it with others. You don't just hoard it to yourself, right? Money has no meaning if it is hoarded in the bank. It is only as good as to the use it is put to, right? So, so resources will be used as benediction. If it is an unfavorable outcome from a material point of view, you will still take it as a prasad buddhi, that it is good for me. What is it? What is the learning or what is the blessing in that situation? Right?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Haji.
Yeah, I just want to know, like, if something wrong is being done to us, so is it like an action in inaction? Like if you're not doing anything about it, but does it become like a judgment also? Like, are we thinking like, are we judging the other person, or do we take it up with the other person saying that it's wrong what you're doing?
Very good question. So if something you perceive as something that is being done in a wrongful manner to you, then there are like, it really depends on the context. It's very, very difficult to give a very general answer. It could be a case of your perception, or it could be something like, what can you do about it? One thing that is very clear is Gita does not teach us to be victims. Okay, it is very far from that. You're not supposed to take anything and everything people give you as like a victim, like I cannot say anything. It doesn't say that you should sit quiet. Arjun did not sit quietly. He fought against the enemies and he did a good job of it, right? So he's in fact exhorted to fight the war inside and outside. So a very specific situation will tell you whether what you're doing and how you should behave in that situation. So if you have an example, then I'm happy to hear and then be able to see if we can help you with that. But I can give you an example from my side, right? Like a few weeks ago, so there is a particular project that I'm working on, and it's a fairly big project with like fairly large number of contenders, stakeholders, and mostly external, right? So I'm trying to attract right type of stakeholders. One particular stakeholder, I've been trying to engage with them for months now, and they gave a quotation to work with us, which I thought was egregious at every level. Like, and I thought their attitude to working with us was not a partner like attitude. It was a very like transactional attitude. Just pay me $200,000 and then there is no guarantee of whether results get created or not. All the risk is on us, and all they'll do is they'll take away the money. And I just thought that the proposal was like, in my words, I immediately judged them as like the usual financial house rent seekers. And these are the type of people who should be disrupted. That is why finance industry has been disrupted. I had all these thoughts. You see, these are all coming from a space of judgment. Did I say them to them? No, I didn't. Right? It was all at my thought level. I honestly thought that they were the worst rent seekers, parasites, blah, blah. You can imagine all the words that I actually thought of them. And at a action level, I'm being very nice to them, right? Just asking them very nicely, like, can you just, like, I'm trying to justify this to my board. And can you tell me what is the value that is being created? What are the services you will offer against this? I'm trying to kind of get across to them that I don't think this price is reasonable. So tell me what you are giving against this price, right? That relationship went nowhere for months. Nowhere. Okay. I reached a point where there is like almost no communication between us and them for 2 months. I continued working on other aspects of the project until it reached a point where they came into the critical path. We have to solve for this, otherwise, this project is a dead duck. And my lawyer pretty much told me, I'm going to stop working on your documents unless you solve for this. Get the stakeholder on board or we are out. I actually was very, very terse with me, right? Literally, like I was near tears after I put down the phone. I sat down and I thought about it, like what's going wrong with this project? Like what is going wrong with the stakeholder? And I was very quickly able to discern that first, there is ego here. Any kind of judgment, first of all, if I'm creating a negative judgment for this person, even though I feel justified in holding that perception for this person because he's obviously doing it, right? So they are being this person, I'm justified in making a judgment, all of those things, but immediately judgment comes from a space of ego, even if I can't recognize it. I feel justified. This is not coming from ego. This is what they are doing, right? But I knew that even if I don't understand where it's coming from, I actually prayed to God and I said, look, I understand at a symptomatic level that this is coming from a space of ego. I don't see where that ego is, but 100% it is there somewhere. I am dedicating it to you. I do not want to act from a space of ego. I do not want to create judgments. I just want what is best for this project. Guide me on how I should do this and what I should do. And that day just happened to be Ekadashi as well. So it was just a beautiful day. I prayed for like 30 minutes. I was meditating and asking guidance, like, what should I be doing on this? And I promised God that I'm going to drop my ego, I'm going to drop my judgment, and I need you to help me with this. Because I don't even know what to drop. I don't know where the ego is, right? But I just made that pray. And then I sat down and I thought about what would I do differently now. And I just got a spur of things that I should do. I dropped all judgments. I dropped all of that and I started taking action, sending out messages to multiple different parties, different stakeholders in different parts. And within a day, like this was Wednesday, next Thursday, I had 3 meetings aligned when I had been struggling to get anything moved for 3 months. I got 3 meetings aligned. This was Thursday. Next Friday, I got a call from these people saying that we have had our operating whatever, like, OPCO has happened. And we have approved the plan to work with you guys. This happened within a space of 8 days flat. After I took responsibility that I'm operating from ego, and that is what is the biggest factor that's coming into this project moving forward. Right? And sometimes I don't even know, but symptomatically I could see that judgment has to come from ego somewhere. I have to drop this. So this is an example where I thought somebody else is doing something wrong to me, but I had to change something in myself to create a very favorable outcome. How I will now deal with their invoice, their numbers and all is different matter altogether. But this is one example that I just recently had, so I shared here.
Just to add,
I understood.
if it was not a favorable outcome, right, then Prasad Buddhi mindset would mean that you take a step back and you're like, the situation has come for me to constantly work on my ego. Until I'm not able to figure out what that is, then similar things will continue happening.
Yeah.
It's not about the outcome. It is not about the project. It is not about any of that. It is essentially about your own journey.
Yeah. So for me, it's like I constantly see in situations around me, my current life lesson right now, what I need to learn is how to drop ego and krodh. Ahankar and krodh. These are the 2 things I know I have to work on. Every time I let go of them, immediately some badha, some problem comes in the way of getting things done. The moment I control them, the problems disappear when I recognize these 2 things. So I know for a fact that everything that's happening around me right now is helping me improve my, get control over these 2 things. These are my 2 life lessons to learn for the time being.
It's finished. Have we finished reading?
No, we have a little bit left.
Yeah, it would thus be clear that when an act is done only as an enjoined duty, neither does its success bring elation, nor does its failure create despondency in the doer. An act performed as a bounden duty is done with full and honest effort, and the doer is unaffected by its success or failure. Having once decided upon a duty as the end, the means become ends themselves, and no effort is spared to make the means perfect, irrespective of what the outcome would be. Done in this manner, all actions become inactions. If anyone has an end in view but is negligent in adopting suitable means, this omission becomes an action itself and leads to undergoing the results of imperfect actions. It follows, therefore, that determining duty clearly and then making full efforts to perform it makes all actions of superior merit. This is why the Lord holds such a one in the category of yogi and a fit performer of actions.
We've covered this.
Yeah.
We have a couple of birthdays. Is it okay if we extend by 10 minutes into the birthday greetings for Anita and Ramya? Yeah. Just get a little bit of rice. So, Ramya, it was your birthday, right? On 20 September? No?
No.
No, her birthday is in October.
His birthday last on 27th August.
Okay. I think I got the wrong date then. But I think it's anyways Anita's birthday. So Anita, it'd be good if you can get a little bit of rice for us to bless.
Give me 1 minute. I'll be right back.